Now, here is a somewhat different story with a different outcome. So as I mentioned, Mehdi Hasan had his show canceled by ESPN, by MSNBC. And while it was true that Mehdi Hasan's ratings were pathetic, I mean, I would watch them. I would look at MSNBC's ratings when Mehdi Hasan's show was on the air, and he would have something like 30,000 people, 30,000 watching his show under the age of 55, which are the only recognizable audience members. That's the only one that networks can monetize, which is barely the size of a mid-sized YouTube program. For the debate that we broadcast on Saturday night on January 6th, without much promotion, we had in excess of 40,000 people watching, more than anyone who tuned into MSNBC on Saturday night during Mehdi Hasan's show. That's how much we're on Rumble, which is a platform still unknown to at least 50% of Americans. And then you had that same debate streamed on many other outlets where the audience size was infinitely greater than any show Mehdi Hasan has done. At the same time, though, it is true that low ratings, pathetic ratings are the norm for MSNBC, especially their weekend shows and their shows on Peacock. Nobody is watching any of these shows. And so the question is, why was Mehdi Hasan removed from having a show, and why was he ultimately forced out? And the assumption of most of his defenders was that the reason is because he was constrained from speaking too harshly about Israel, something he did anyway, and as a result was taken off the air for it. Now, if you look at the circumstantial evidence, you can certainly conclude that that's a plausible scenario. But what's so interesting here is that Mehdi Hasan has not actually said that. Mehdi Hasan could easily go and start his own independent media platform at Substack or on YouTube or at Rumble and make a lot more money than he was making at MSNBC. That's for sure, especially if he accompanied it by the admission that he was in a way censored. And yet the reason Mehdi Hasan refuses to do that is because, unlike so many people who have finally come to realize that you can be much more influential outside of corporate media, in fact, in a lot of ways, leaving corporate media is a prerequisite to building an audience that trusts you. When I left The Intercept, the number of people reading my articles, the number of people who watch my show, the number of people who just in general across the political spectrum decided that I was trustworthy doubled and then tripled and then quadrupled and even more, and hasn't stopped, because when you're independent, when people understand that you're no longer subjected to the constraints of corporate media, only then can you be trustworthy. Only then can you really build a massive audience and have a lot of influence. And yet it really is still true that for some people, what they value most is the kind of artificial prestige that still does come from being able to be on television with these networks, even if nobody's watching. One of the things we found on this show, we have heard from so many other people who have independent media outlet shows that have large audiences, as large as, if not bigger than, a lot of cable shows, is that very few politicians will come on your show to be interviewed if they know that you're going to interview them adversarially. They'll come on your show if you want to interview them about something where you agree with them, but if it's a topic they know they're going to be grilled on, they generally won't go on those shows. But if CNN or MSNBC calls a Republican politician will often go on MSNBC or CNN, even though they know they're going to be treated unfairly, because there's a prestige where they get to call their family and say, I'm going to be on CNN, I'm going to be on MSNBC, watch me. There's still this kind of like reflexive craving for the approval of these corporate brands, and it seems very obvious that Mehdi Hasan craves more than anything access to mainstream journalism, and that's the reason why he's so unwilling even to claim or say that that was the reason he lost his job, was because he went too far in Israel. I mean, if Mehdi Hasan is a journalist and that was part of why he lost his show, he certainly has an obligation to say that a major corporation like NBC has within it major constraints on what people can say who are journalists about a major war that's taking place, but he's too afraid to say it because he doesn't want to lose his access to the possibility to keep a mainstream job, which is cowardly and pathetic. But that is still part of the dynamic, even as independent media grows and grows. And here's the point I want to conclude on with this whole episode about Mehdi Hasan and Pat McAfee, which is, I have heard so many journalists say that they strongly believe, in fact, barely question it, that the reason that Mehdi Hasan lost his job at MSNBC was because he crossed a line that you're not allowed to cross in criticizing Israel too harshly. And he was very adversarial in how he interviewed Israeli officials. I've known Mehdi for a long time. I played a major role in recruiting him to come to The Intercept. I know that Mehdi's dream in life was to host an MSNBC show. He was willing to do or say anything in order to make that happen. He became a rabid partisan to the Democratic Party, which is the requirement to be there. And yet he went over one line, which was Israel, and now he's not only had his show taken away, but he's out of MSNBC. And I think what it's so interesting is that so many journalists, corporate journalists, are saying that Mehdi lost his job because he went too far in criticizing Israel without realizing what they're saying about how deeply corrupt corporate media is. What they're essentially saying, which I believe 100%, based on everything I've seen, having one foot in corporate media over my career and one foot out, is that the only way you can stay in corporate media and work for them, a condition for thriving in corporate media, is that you have to stay within the lines ideologically and politically that they set. And the minute you go outside of that line, no matter what, no matter how good your ratings are, you will lose your job, which is why Tucker Carlson is no longer on Fox News. Because Tucker Carlson was becoming too much of a nuisance, in fact, a threat to Republican orthodoxy. That's why when Tucker Carlson lost his job, so many cowardly Republican establishment members of Congress came forward and said how much easier their lives will be now that he's no longer on the air, because he was too much of a dissident on things like Ukraine, and now we're seeing what he's saying on Israel. And Tucker Carlson's job, just like every person's job in corporate media, is dependent upon their willingness to stay within very rigidly constructed lines about what people can and cannot say. And they're essentially admitting that by saying about Mehdi Hasan that he lost his job for crossing that line in Israel, without realizing what it's saying about themselves, the level of subservience to which they're willing to subject themselves to keep these jobs inside corporate media. And I think more than anything, the reason why corporate media has lost the trust and faith in the public is because people know they're propaganda machines, that they're heavily regimented. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.